Aquatic animals, new cities to explore, and an auction gone wild. Hello, I'm Matthew and welcome to the Watch It Played news. Alright, let's not bury the lead. Ark Nova is getting an expansion named Aquarius, which is adding in a bunch of new elements to the game but focuses on sea animals that each have to be played in new special enclosures that must be built adjacent to water. More penguins. Do it. People love penguins. They're nature's way of reminding us that life in general is ridiculous. Roughly half the sea animals are reef dwellers, and whenever you add a reef dweller to your zoo, you trigger the ability of all the reef dwellers in your zoo, which sounds exciting. There's also the addition of a fourth university on the association board, which will be used to help you draw the type of card that you really need. As well as for each of the 5 action cards, there will be 4 alternate versions with a little twist for you to draft, which seems very interesting because it increases the asymmetry of the game. Also, there's new bonus tiles and final scoring cards included. My money would be on this not being the last expansion for Ark Nova, a game that has been so very hot for so very long. It's like Earth. But hopefully this will cool me down when it splashes down next year. Just in time to deep dive into the game that helped sponsor this episode, the upcoming legendary Black Widow from Upper Deck. Orphaned as a child, the past of Natasha Romanoff, also known as the Deadly Avenger Black Widow, has held secrets to her gifted nature, but sometimes the darkness hides a protector. And now Black Widow joins other heroes to thwart masterminds like Taskmaster and strike fear into the hearts of her enemies in the latest legendary expansion, Legendary Black Widow, which includes all new 100 cards to introduce new adventures to the Marvel Legendary base game. Follow the link in this video's description to add Natasha to the roster of heroes soon when this set releases at your friendly local game store and, of course, upperdeckstore.com this September. The next 2 games in Stefan Feld and Queen Games' Cities collection were announced, with Vienna being the reimagining of the classic 2014 title La Isla, though this time instead of scientists looking for animals in a tropical island, players will search to discover spies hidden around the city. And the second game is Cuzco, which is the reimagining of 2013's dice-driven Bora Bora. Look, the originals are both excellent games, so it's exciting to see more titles enter this series, especially the harder to find ones. Bora to Bora isn't that easy to come by nowadays, and it's such a good game. There's not much known about any changes to the gameplay or when they'll be crowdfunded. But okay, this is just a little bit of my speculative observations, but Super Meeple only a couple of years ago reprinted a classic game, Java, by prolific designers and changed the name to Cuzco. Actually, there's also a game already called Vienna. Those are different titles. Well, they have the same title, but they're different games. But either way, more Stefan Feld reprints are good news in my book, so I'm excited to see more about these when they launch. And talking about Stefan Feld reprints, and I was, that comes up again in this news about Trick or Treat Studios, who we talked about recently because of their Dream Factory reprint called Nightmare Productions, which I'm very excited about. But they have been busy. Firstly, with a semi-cooperative 2 to 4 player game, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, based on the 1974 movie, where we are told to find gas and van keys before Leatherface takes you to the killing room. You know, if you've got a dedicated space in your house, you're probably pretty serious about your hobbies. I'm sure we can all relate to that. You and your friends have unfortunately run out of gas on the side of the highway and need to find help. You need to search for the keys and gas by using actions to flip over tokens, and once those items have been found, you need to get back to the van in order to escape. But Leatherface will be there to chase the players throughout the map. And if he catches a player, he'll lock them up, where the other players have only 3 turns to help them escape. But that's not all from Trick or Treat Studios, because they've also announced a classic collection, starting with a reprint of a game I love, Gold West, now with an added water expansion and added art by Vincent Dutrait, as well as upcoming reprints of At the Gates of Liang, Scoville and Stefan Feld's Luna. And if that lineup sounds familiar, it's because all 4 games were previously printed by Tasty Minstrel Games. So it's nice that they've found a new home with Trick or Treat, and I'm excited to know what other games they might reprint in the future, because so far I'm very happy. The latest offering from Eagle Griffin Games, designer Vital Lacerda and artist Ian O'Toole has been announced, coming after games like Lisboa and On Mars, is Inventions Evolution of Ideas, releasing sometime next year for 2 to 4 players. Since the dawn of time, we are told, humanity has sought new ideas, forever developing them into still newer concepts. Our genius makes us stand out from the other animals, well, except for that one very clever possum. Us pesky humans with our tools made us Homo sapiens technologists since before historical records were invented. And then we invented them. An Inventions Evolution of Ideas follows humanity's most noteworthy inventions. My favourite invention, the t-shirt cannon. Cards simulate these new concepts that eventually become inventions, and once they are invented, technologies can be shared with the world, and everyone involved in the process gets credit. So if you're a fan of this series, then this is sure to excite. Flat Out Games have announced the 1 to 6 player puzzly tile placement game Fit to Print by Tiny Towns designer Peter McPherson, where you play as editors of local newspapers in Thistleville, the world's most bustling little town, and you need to make sure that the right things make it onto the front pages, which is hard to do with so many important news items breaking all the time, such as who took home first prize for their baked goods at the community fair, or who's been digging in Mr. Brambleberry's carrot patch. Well, crime have no boundaries. Players simultaneously collect newspaper tiles, stacking them on their desk until they think they have what they need to make the perfect front page. Then they will yell, "Lay out!" and begin to lay out the page by carefully considering the placement of centerpieces, articles, photographs, and advertisements. When everything is just right, they yell, "Print!" to be the first off the presses and gain their choice of centerpiece for the next round. And if real-time games aren't for you, there are alternate modes such as slow mode and puzzle mode. This one looks just lovely, and honestly it's very similar to how I write this news show, and everything about it, from the art to the gameplay, looks like it's up my street. As well as Flat Out Games, frankly, have an amazing precedent when it comes to puzzle games, with Cascadia and Calico coming before it, so I'm looking forward to it hitting the press next year. 2F Spiel have announced Findorff for 1 to 5 players from Power Grid designer Freedom and Freeze, as well as lots and lots of other great games. Freedom and Freeze is just great. Fuji Flush, I'll say it, underrated card game. It's amazing. In Findorff, players build up the district of Findorff in the period between 1803 and 1916, when historically 6 major railway stations stood to connect Hanover, Hamburg, Oldenburg and Bremerhaven. While they all were later replaced by a single big main train station, your job is to raise another 3 new rail stations at one of the 2 main road beds to help transport resources. Findorff looks to be a deep engine builder with resource markets similar to the one in Power Grid, as well as a bunch of resource management required for the building of rail tracks and houses. And apparently you can even profit from the high mortality rate of the period by running a cemetery, which is also certainly something. This one looks great, but also, did anyone else see the best board game cover of all time? Because I sure did, and it's Freeze's other 2022 release, Fancy Feathers. It's just perfection. This one is a 2-player game where, by order of the Baroness, you begin to search for noble pheasants in a tricky set collection game, which I 100% have to own. Look at it. It's magnificent. Sorry, it's magnificent. Now for a few quick fire news items that caught my eye this week. We have Noli from Riverhorse for 2 to 4 players. In the Middle Ages, Noli was a flourishing maritime town under the benevolent patronage of the powerful Republic of Genoa. And every September, in order to determine the fishing rights for the following fishing season, the fishing boats of the 4 districts run a 1,600-metre regatta. But not satisfied with this single form of competition, the merchant families of each district compete with each other to build tall red brick towers as a display of their wealth. This looks just lovely to me, so I'm certainly very interested. Hike It is coming to Kickstarter from Zycotic Games, which again, just presentation wise, speaks to me. This one puts you deep into the Great Smoky Mountains with just your pack and your wits. I'm dead. You will compete for experiences, scenic spots, skills, camps and gear, while overcoming challenges like injuries, dehydration, exhaustion, bad weather and bears. by choosing your gear, planning your route, and building your skill set to make it back to the trailhead through a mixture of action selection, set collection, resource management, events, and push your luck with a touch of trading and take that. The game supports 1 to 4 players and offers solo, competitive, and team options. The deeply thematic, competitive story-driven game of adventure and exploration, Destinies from Lucky Duck Games is getting a new expansion called Witchwood that adds new scenarios for players to explore in a world filled with folklore-inspired creatures, monsters, and adventures. And Witchwood promises that the decisions that players make in this scenario can drastically change the world the characters find themselves in and can impact the later scenarios. So look out for that one next year as well. And finally, we have some pretty massive board game business news via ICV2 with the acquisition of TCG Player by eBay. So TCG Player in many ways is kind of like eBay, but for collectible card games. And so eBay, which is kind of like TCG Player, but for everything, bought it for $295 million. TCG Players is arguably one of the best places to go if you need specific Magic the Gathering cards or something like that, though they recently announced that they were moving into the collectible sports card space as well. And eBay's Dawn Block announced, quote, eBay has always fueled our customers' passion in this space and facilitated connections between buyers and sellers. And with TCG Player, we can enhance the customer experience across categories, forge even more relationships, and cater to enthusiasts around the world. I find this all very interesting. eBay were also at Gen Con, like with a booth. They were giving away copies of an exclusive eBay board game, and it seems as though they have seen that the board, card, and tabletop world is expanding, and they're looking to be a part of it. To me, this speaks to the strength and growth of the hobby. And honestly, things like this make me very hopeful. I mean, we often talk about the golden age of board games, or on the contrary, when will the bubble burst? But eBay, for one, certainly seem to believe, to the tune of almost $250 million, that the bubble has some room to grow. And that's the news. But if you're up for spending some more time with me, then follow this link and help me answer the internet's burning board game questions. I'll see you over there.